Hi there, everyone. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to practice journal. And I've got practice in brackets because not only are we going to talk about how to practice, but we're going to be talking about the purpose of practice and how we can use the journal to help it. First, though, let's understand the purpose of a journal. And part of that purpose deals with the challenge in developing new habits and learning new things. And this can be especially tricky if we don't understand the habits we already have. And this is where journaling comes in. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg was a book that helped me really understand how to approach learning, as well as how to approach creating a space in which we can learn. There's an allegory that I always bring up to students about journaling and its power. And it had to deal with patients who were obese that had to lose weight. There were all kinds of studies about various diets, various approaches, but nothing seemed to really stick after about 3 months. It wasn't until they started having patients journal everything they ate that they really noticed a difference. At first, patients were really annoyed, but after a little bit of time, they noticed that the patients who had journaled lost twice as much weight as the other patients. This was because the patients began to think of eating differently, and they began to recognize their habits and make decisions about them. For example, one patient talked about how he was hungry at 11 o'clock and there just wasn't really anything to eat. So he realized, oh, instead of eating a candy bar, I'm going to bring an apple. Another patient realized that she just needed to get up and walk around. And so she'd just take a little stroll for 5 minutes, meander around, come back, and get back to work. Another patient realized that he just needed a little bit of social contact. So he would just go get a glass of water from the cooler and do the traditional, hey, let's just talk around the water cooler. But again, the purpose of the journal is to help us with some of the biggest challenges in learning. And that is creating the time to do it and finding a method for us to figure out how. But in order to understand the method, let's talk about the science of practice. I'm sure all of you have heard the saying, practice makes perfect. But experts are more along the lines of saying not necessarily. Practice is an essential part of creating routine, but the question is, what kind of routine do we need? Repetition is great once we've established something that we want to develop, but it's not the only way to play, and it's not the only thing we want. This is because learning occurs when we recognize difference, according to the book How We Learn by Benedict Carey. This was a book that really brought to my attention the need for variety. Here's why. In this book, Carey talks about a study of 8-year-olds throwing beanbags blindfolded. And then after throwing, they could take a look to see how it turned out. There were two groups, one that practiced throwing at a 3-foot target and another at a target 2 to 4 feet away. After 12 weeks of equal practice, they competed throwing at the 3-foot target. Can you guess who won? It seems kind of unfair, right? You would assume that the group practicing at the 3-foot target would have won. But they didn't. The group that practiced variety had a much higher success rate than the other group. Later, this study would be repeated with 12-year-olds, and they even found more of a difference between the two groups. What this practice style is called is interleaving, and it's a type of practice that by practicing variety, it helps highlight the element that you're trying to learn. Sports psychology, for example, uses this all the time, and professional athletes are well aware of this kind of training. The idea is to challenge ourselves by testing ourselves through performing or switching things up or practicing a variety of different skills that help highlight the ultimate skill we're trying to learn. This helps us both improve our memory retention and our memory retrieval. A big part of this is also learning by visualizing. Carey talks about this in his book as well. It's called a perception learning module, and this is actually what the fretboard diagrams are. It works by training the subconscious mind to react to stimuli. So when you're filling out your fretboard diagrams, I'm very specific about where you put the note because ultimately that's where you're going to want to put your finger. So you're not just learning the notes, you're also visualizing how to play without actually knowing that. But visualizing can also be conscious. In the book The Body Has a Mind of Its Own by Sandra Blakesley, she brought up a very interesting study. There was a study of five groups who were throwing darts. One group didn't practice at all. They were called the control group. There was another group who just practiced by throwing. And then there were three groups who did a variety of practice time dedicated to mental training. They did not throw darts the same amount of time as the group who only threw darts for practice. What they did instead was they practiced things such as visualizing, body awareness training, and relaxing to various different degrees. The results after 8 weeks were pretty interesting. Each group threw 50 darts, and then they were scored how many points that they got for that dart. First group, unsurprisingly, no improvement. The second group had a 67-point improvement. The third group had an 111-point improvement. And note, this group actually threw darts less. By the time you get to the fifth group, there was a 165-point improvement. That's over 100% difference than the second group who just threw darts. Thus, we can use a journal in practice for a couple different things. One, the journaling helps us see what our practice is. It helps us see what we're avoiding. It also can help us see when we get obsessed. And yes, we can practice too much. We can get too focused on things and not actually be learning anything, but instead be practicing a routine that maybe we don't want. Also, very importantly, we can actually see accomplishment. Additionally, journaling helps us play creatively. It's kind of funny because at first people think, oh, this is like Big Brother. But I don't really care what you write as much as I care about you being honest about what you do to yourself. Because in that, you can see that, oh my gosh, I do the same thing all the time. Why don't I do something different? The playing tasks that you're given are actually designed to be creative to express yourself and play around with rhythm, volume, and dynamics. Lastly, journaling helps us visualize. By writing down what we did and any important details and observations we might have had, we're actually practicing memory retrieval as we put it into words. We're challenging ourselves to visualize what we just did, remember it, and then write it out in a format that's very different than the one we just did it in, playing. Okay, so that's the science, but let's talk about some tips. One of the first and most important tips I have is to get a timer. Pick a goal for that block of time, play, and then write. This will help avoid you getting bogged down. 10 minutes maximum is what I'm recommending you do for this week. And I'm not saying just for this class. I'm saying for any guitar playing you're doing. So for those of you who play on your own outside of beginning guitar, great, set a timer. Just like those patients who were obese that had to lose weight, the only way they could lose weight was by writing everything down. Once you have the timer set, pick a clear, reasonable goal for each block. Perhaps if you're doing the joint review, set it for 5 minutes and then try to do it from memory and then check to see how you did afterwards. Or maybe learn the notes for the melody from Prelude 1, which is one of your songs that you'll do for your final in this class. Just trying to say the note names and then trying to play them on the guitar. The idea here is to balance creating a space to practice while at the same time allowing for freedom to figure out what that practice means. Once that time is finished, then journal. Write what you just did. And when you're writing this journal, be sure to include the following, just to give you more details. Of course, the day and time. This will help you understand if, oh wow, I'm not getting enough time because I'm playing on days where I'm really busy, or at times when I'm super sleepy. Put the duration of the time that you spent on the task, just so you can keep track of what you're really doing. Write out what you did as you did that task. Did you just kind of go through the motions? Or did you challenge yourself? And if you did, how did you do it? Or did you experiment with the task? For example, if you're doing the playing task number 1, the joint review, maybe you just sat and explored your shoulder blade for the 5 minutes, and that was all you did. Cool, that's great. And then maybe you have some observations. Maybe you would be like, wow, I had no idea what it felt like to have a front, top, and back to the shoulder blade. I always thought it was so two-dimensional. That could be an observation. And then also any other observations you might have. Maybe discovering that made you feel nauseous. I actually hear that, not a majority of the time, but frequently within my classes, that sometimes new concepts about the joint review makes you feel weird. Or Maybe you just felt frustrated because it's the first time you've done something, such as the Spanish finger kick, the rasgueado. Doing the upstroke sometimes is challenging for people. Then do it again. Set the timer, pick another goal, and keep going with your practice. If you need to take a break, take a break. Great, come back, set the timer. Note, it's really important that doing a summary at the end of the day or at the end of the week is not the same. The problem is you lose track of what you're doing. Write it in the moment so you can really see it. I'm not saying there's no purpose in writing it at the end of the week, but in this class, I'm looking for you to do it in the moment. And it's really apparent when you're doing it at the end of the week because you'll just won't be writing anything very insightful after a while. Okay, so that's the approach to journaling that I came up with, and you can kind of find a variety of ideas or variations that suit you. The biggest idea is that you get that information in your journal. But now, let's talk about how to practice. And one of the most important things is to switch it up and be creative. We need to do things to break up the routine within the routine. We need routine to get things done on one hand, but too much of it just makes us numb, kind of like zombies out there. So one of the simplest ways is just to play in a different chair or a different part of the house or move in different ways. Maybe it's even just staring at the wall because when you're playing an instrument into the wall, it sounds really different. It actually can be really beautiful because it echoes in a way you wouldn't hear otherwise. Another way is just to play the song or the task differently. You could play it backwards. You could skip measures. Or you could play every other note. You could also break that song into chords and rhythm and melody and practice each one of those individually. It's kind of like you were a member of your own band, strumming the chords, or you could even sing the melody or sing the rhythm. You could also change the rhythm and play it as if it were a reggae song or samba or a swing song. You could also play with the sounds you're getting from the guitar. You could play with very bright tones or very metallic tones or dark or alternate sounds every 2 measures. There's all kinds of variety that you can do. The guitar was once considered an orchestra in the box. Could you imitate the instruments of an orchestra? Of course, you can also play with volume. The guitar only gets so loud, but it can get very, very quiet. So find your quietest notes. Find your loudest notes. Find the medium notes. Go from very soft to very loud in a very slow, progressive manner. Or do it very quickly and jump from one to the other. Decrescendo, which is going from very loud to very soft. You can do it quickly or you can do it slow. Once you start playing with these various factors, you can decide what to do with the rhythm, volume, and tone, and play a song as if it were a mood, such as sad, or happy, or goofy, angry, anxious, even sarcastic. There's all kinds of different ideas. If you think back to the science of practice, another important thing to do is test yourself. And this is not test in the way like, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious, but it's kind of challenge yourself. Make it new. Play something from memory. That's a great way to challenge yourself. If you're learning a new piece of music, just pick one phrase or maybe one measure and see if you can understand it well enough that you can memorize it. And if you don't, fine. Go back to the music and find out what you got right and what you got wrong. It's just a game. Another way is to sing one part while you play another. Sometimes in music, I have a melody that I play above an accompaniment. Sometimes it helps to just play the accompaniment while I sing the melody. And then I'll switch it. Then I'll play the melody and sing the accompaniment. Another way is just to try to remember what the notes are. And I'll try to say the note names in time. That's kind of similar to singing in some respects. But it's usually when I'm just at the very early stages of trying to find out where they're at the guitar. Sometimes I also just try to visualize where the fingering is at. Going note by note away from the guitar, imagining myself moving to it. This is part of that conscious visualization that Sandra Blakesley was talking about. A great way to test yourself, play for a friend. You'll find out very quickly what you do and don't know by sharing that song with a person you know well. Of course, one of the greatest ways to test yourself, record. There's no greater educator than actually hearing yourself. And seeing yourself is always kind of surprising. But be kind. And also be curious. It's pretty fascinating. And last but not least, go ahead and try to teach someone something you just learned. Maybe tell a loved one like, hey, look at this is what I'm doing and this is interesting because, Or, oh wow, I just learned this about rhythm. Teaching someone is one of the greatest ways to learn. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I'm a teacher. I learn so much, and I often learn much more than my students because all I do is just focus on learning and testing what I learn. In closing, above all else, be sure to play. And when I say play, I mean it in the meaning of curiosity, creativity, and joy. Of course, there are challenges as we're playing the guitar, but isn't that the point? If it were easy, would we really want to do it? So just embrace the challenge and find the joy in playing the guitar as we are in that moment. This requires us to also avoid judging. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, I keep hitting the wrong note, instead say, wow, I keep hitting a D flat instead of a D. Oh, that's interesting. If you approach things in this manner, you can take out some of the anxiety from your playing and actually find more freedom to play the note you wanted. Last but not least, remember that what we're doing is really a privilege. Having an instrument in our hands that makes a sound, that's a pretty amazing thing. So enjoy. All right, that's my little how-to on to practice and journal. But above all else, it's more like play than journal. All right, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.